Hello there and welcome to the channel. My name is Simon and you're watching Walking Talking Gardeners. And in this video we're going to be talking about those 5 mistakes, yes 5 mistakes that you will wish to avoid when it comes to growing Strelitzia reginae, the absolutely wonderful bird of paradise plant. The bird of paradise plant is a native to the southern regions of South Africa, and it has a warm, temperate, almost subtropical climate there, where temperatures probably won't go any further down than -2 degrees Celsius, with summer highs of around 35 degrees Celsius. Now it is fairly similar to the climate we experience here in the UK on the south coast. Obviously further north it just gets way too cold for it. The only big difference is that in South Africa you do tend to get these wet, warm summers and quite dry winters, which is kind of the opposite we have here. And that rainfall in the winter is something that you would need to mitigate in order to grow these plants at their best. Let's get into it in a little more detail. Actually, before I start, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on the genus name Strelitzia. It was named in honor of Princess Charlotte Mecklenburg-Strelitz.
I really like flowers.
No, I didn't give you any lines. Jesus. Who ended up being the Queen of England after marrying George III. You know, the one who went a bit woo, and was actually housed in the palace at Kew Gardens, the smallest royal palace in the whole of England. So this is my bird of paradise, and can I just point out this ornithogalen, which is another flowering plant from South Africa, and if you notice it has exactly the same coloured blooms. I'll put that a bit nearer. There you go, £3 at Morrison's, everybody. You do see this common coloration in flowers. In particular, you'll see this in South America, where a lot of the flowering plants come out gorgeous red, because the pollinating hummingbirds see this colour as a signifier that there is some nectar there to be taken. And these also are a bird pollinating plant. They use sunbirds rather than hummingbirds, because there are no hummingbirds in South Africa, and of course they will perch on this beak-like structure here and take the nectar from within. The flower is actually this part. Right, so let's get started.
Mistake number 1, watering.
So we are talking about a plant that has evolved to live in a part of the world which experiences warm, wet summers and cooler, dry winters, and you want to try and match that as best as you can when you're growing it here in the UK, which for most of the country will be in a pot, although I have seen them growing outside all year round in the Isles of Scilly in Tresco. They have them outside all year round, and also in Tree Bar Gardens in Cornwall. However, you need that soil fairly well drained, because if they experience waterlogged conditions, then they can be prone to root rots, fungal infections, damage to the leaves and stunted growth. So when you're potting these on, then you need to put in a nice thick layer of gravel at the very base, a few inches of pea gravel or horticultural gravel, so that you have at least lots of air pockets available in the soil. And the compost itself, it doesn't really matter. It's not too worried about the pH. It can be neutral, slightly acidic, slightly alkaline. It's not too worried too much about that, but I would recommend adding to whatever compost you purchase probably about a good 20% horticultural grit, just to improve that drainage, so you can water it without worrying about it becoming too wet or at worst waterlogged. And you can improve that by using a porous pot. Now you could get terracotta pots, you could get concrete pots, which I don't really like to use, but both of those they will help to suck out moisture if your compost gets too wet.
Mistake number 2, position.
Yes, The temptation when you have one of these plants is to put it somewhere in the garden where you are going to see it, and chances are you haven't purchased one that is in flower or in condition to flower, so it won't really matter at this point. But typically people would place it where they can see it, where it's going to look the best, so maybe from your kitchen window or when you're sitting on your patio and you're looking at it and it's right there. But that may not be the best place to put your plant in order to get it to flower and to provide it the conditions that it needs to grow at its best. Consider your microclimates within the garden. These plants require full sun all day, every day, as best as you can, and it also wants to be kept as warm as possible too. So, for example, if you have a south or southwest corner of your house which is brick, you place it there, it's going to have rain protection over the winter from the eaves. It's also going to get full sun every day because of the location and the site of it, and it's going to get that radiant heat from the brickwork throughout the year, day and night, so you get in additional heat, additional light, and a little bit of rain protection. So always consider the microclimates of your garden and try to put the plant where it will do best for itself rather than where it will look best from where you are standing.
Mistake number 3. Wrong pot size.
As you know, I'm a big fan of the Royal Horticultural Society and their website. However, sometimes our advice differs, and this is one of those times. Now, we both agree that Strelitzias tend to flower at their best when they are root bound, and the RHS recommends that you repot on these plants every couple of years. Now, it can take between 3 and 5 years for a Strelitzia to come into flower because it needs to be of a certain size, and in particular a certain root mass, so it's got enough energy to power these massive, thick, plasticky, leathery blooms. But in my experience, as soon as you pot on one of these, it tends to divert all its energy into producing these big, thick, succulent roots. And I'm not surprised because if you see these plants where they're planted around the Mediterranean in these hot, dry conditions in which they do quite well, these big, thick roots, they're there to act as protection against drying out and running out of nutrition. So every time you repot on one of these, it tends to divert energy into root growth and not leaf growth. And then once it's happy that it's got enough root, then it starts to put out some leaves. So if you keep repotting it on, then you're mostly just going to get foliage rather than the flowers that you've bought the plant for. So this is my advice. When you have purchased your plant, pot it on into the largest pot that you can carry, because believe me, you will be carrying it in and out of protection over the winter and early spring, depending on how cold the overnight frosts are. Now, you'll put it in there, it may look a bit silly, but what that plant will do is then start producing its big root system, and once it's had enough of that, it's going to start pushing out those leaves. And give it 3 years or so, and then it will start to produce its flower blooms. But if you keep potting it on, you are going to be delaying that flowering time, which is not what we're trying to do. So this is the way I do it. You've seen my plants are in flower. That was a 3-year-old plant. Job done. One potting on. The amount of times I see these people with these poor spindly plants, they repot it on, it's just an absolute faff. You need to give the plant what it needs to feel comfortable. The moment you start playing around with these plants can be shocked and they will sulk and they will not flower.
Mistake number 4. Overwintering.
Now, this is probably the most important part of looking after your Strelitzias. You check the Royal Horticultural website's table of hardiness, and it will say that these plants need to be kept at a minimum of between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius. Now, that's not strictly true. I've had these kept in greenhouses over winter without heat, temperatures down to no more than -4 outside, so it'd be a little bit warmer inside, and they've been absolutely fine. In fact, they look like they've just come off the nursery, like superb conditions. Keep them on the dry side, but you will need to give them some water just to stop them from desiccating and becoming damaged, because that will shock the plant. So you will give some water every 3 to 4 weeks, not a whole load of water, but just to keep it going. But do be aware that if temperatures do start to drop below -4 degrees Celsius, then the plant will become shocked. It will survive those temperatures, but you will get leaf damage, you might get root damage, and if that happens, then there's no flowers for you. It will just sulk and regrow, re-establish itself until it's happy, and then might think about flowering next. So if temperatures do go below -4 degrees Celsius, then I would bring it out that greenhouse, put it into a conservatory. It doesn't need any heat, but at least it will be a lot warmer than what it was.
Mistake number 5. Harden off your plant.
Now this is where the fun begins, and the reason why I've advised you to plant it into a pot that you can actually lift, because once the threat of late frosts have passed, you can consider taking your plant out of the greenhouse, wherever protective environment you've kept it in, and put it outside again. But you cannot place it in full sun. It needs hardening off first. And that is because it will not tolerate being placed in full sun once it's been kept under protection, because your leaves will be absolutely scorched to the point of where you're just going to have to remove them, which will then shock the plant, and again it will sulk and may not flower the following year. So it will involve a certain amount of moving. In order to harden it off, you need to place it in a shelter position, which is protected from the full sun during the heat of the day. So you can give it some morning sun, you can give it some late afternoon sun, but certainly not direct sun. And over a period of 10 to 14 days, you can give it a little bit more light, a little bit more direct sunlight, until the end of that time period it is fully toughened off, and you can place it into your final position of south facing full sun. Just be aware in the UK that we do suffer from late frost, so you have to keep an eye on the overnight temperatures, which can dip really until about the end of May, especially if you live further north in the UK. So if that happens, you're going to need to pick up your plant once again, either put it back into the greenhouse or put it back into your conservatory. But eventually it will be able to stay outside for the rest of the year. It's all about trying to avoid these temperature shocks, exposure shocks, because as soon as that happens, the plant will become shocked, and again you won't get those blooms while it's sulking. Anyway, that is everything that I have to say regarding my 5 mistakes to avoid when growing Strelitzias. But if you've got any great advice, then you are more than welcome to put that in the comments. We would love to hear from you, as well as sharing your experience with those other viewers who also like to read the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Right, now, just before you go, if you want to see more content, more behind the scenes stuff, and images that I've taken of some weird freaky plants over the years, then you're in luck, because we've created an Instagram page. So you can find the link in our description, you can find the link on our main page, and if I'm clever enough I might be able to get a link somewhere up there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you want to see more YouTube stuff, then check out this video here. That's quite a good one. And if it doesn't float your boat, then another one right there. And enjoy these while I still got the strength, imagination and aptitude to make them. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.